Welcome to My Life. We're honored and pleased to have Greg Jones with us today. Greg is married to Jill and has been for darn close to 50 years. And they're both from Port Huron originally. Greg is a lifetime member of VFW Post 334 and is heavily involved with the poppy sales every year. He's also a member of Marymount Community Church in Pontiac and does a great deal of volunteering there, and he's lived in Pontiac for over 30 years. I had the honor of meeting Greg over at Oxford High School a few days ago when he was there with other veterans in honor of the Vietnam War Day, answering questions of the kids in little groups throughout the auditorium. So why don't we just start with that? What prompted you to get involved with that?
With going to the high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, they invite us every year. This is the third year I've been there, John. The history teachers, the history department invites the Vietnam veterans every year when they start studying about Vietnam. And we come and we're more than happy to answer their questions, and I try to give them I give them history of how we got involved in why we got involved in Vietnam, history of Vietnam, and how we got out of Vietnam. And a lot of people don't realize it was not a war, it was a police action. We actually won peace. We had peace there in '73. We took all the troops out of there. That was a mistake because in Korea, if you remember, we had all the troops, 30,000 troops in Korea are still there. That's why South Korea is called South Korea. We did not do this in Vietnam. That's why in 1975, it was in 30th of April 1975, the communists came down and grabbed it.
Yeah.
Okay. We're making the same mistake now with pulling all the troops out of Iraq because the terrorists, the murderous thugs in the Middle East have got the whole country by the neck there.
Well, you know, that's a serious subject that we could spend a lot of time on all by itself.
Absolutely.
I want to talk more about you and your life.
Okay.
And also the experience you've had with the kids over there. Have they given you any surprising questions?
Not a whole lot. I'm surprised that they don't know really about what communism is. They don't remember. Well, they were born after 2001, after the 9/11 there. And one of the teachers, I asked him who knows about 9/11, and not too many kids knew that. That was the first year we did it, and very few kids knew about it, and the teacher, I won't mention his name, said, well, they were born a couple, 3 years afterwards. And I said, okay, I think in our generation we all know about what Pearl Harbor was. But so any rate, this year, if you remember, President Obama, they said not to get political. And I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give a good comment to President Obama. And I said, he did something very important, kids. I said, he went down to Cuba and opened up Cuba to rock and roll. And they looked at me kind of funny, and I said, yes, he did. He went down there and met with the Castro brothers, well, at least one of them. And then there was a real good rock and roll band. The band I grew up with was Mick Jagger and Rolling Stones. How many here know about Mick Jagger and Rolling Stones? Not too many kids would raise their hand. They didn't know who.
Was that kind of like us knowing about Glenn Miller, maybe?
It probably was, John, yeah. Yeah, because our parents thought that the country was going to you-know-where in the handbasket when Elvis Presley appeared in 1956 from the waist up.
Now, you were born in Port Huron. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
right?
Yes, sir.
And tell me, were your folks originally from Port Huron
Yes,
as
they were.
well? How far back could you go in your family in Port Huron?
Well, my mom and dad were both born in 26. That's 1926. And they met, they were high school sweethearts. My dad was born on the poor side of town. He was a dashing, young, good-looking man, and my mother came from a influential, how do you say that, family?
Influential?
Influential family. And they met, and my mother's brothers and my mother's dad fell in love with my dad too, and they brought him into the company. And my dad went off to war, and he fought the Japanese in 1944, came back, got married to Mom in 46, had me in 47.
How far have you been able to go back in your family's history?
How far am I able to go back?
Yeah.
I can probably go back to 1890 when Grandpa Hugh used to drive a stagecoach all through the West, where the Indians didn't attack him, but they were looked at him. He used to not drive the stagecoach, but he rode shotgun. He actually had a shotgun.
So that was your great-grandfather?
No, it's just my grandpa.
Your grandfather?
1890. Yeah, he saw all the changes. My grandpa Hugh and of course my grandpa Jones are both farmers, and they saw all the changes. And remember, Grandpa Hugh S. Webb, told me that he went and got his driver's license. He went down and bought a car, and the salesman taught him how to drive it right there, and paid him $300 and drove off the car.
When would that have been?
That would have been early 1900s, I would imagine. I would imagine was when old Henry came out with the Ford. So
where now? You said he was driving stagecoach out west.
right.
Where was he living at the time?
He was brought up as a farmer in Goodles, Michigan. Somehow or other, he got into the West, and he went out there, and he sent some beautiful love letters back to my grandma Blanche. Somewhere in 1926, in March of 1926, we got his picture on the wall. It says March. He was the founder of Webb Fuel Company, and this was in Port Huron, and they had yards all over Michigan and parts of Indiana and Ohio too.
Now, was this your grandfather?
Yes, that was
Okay.
on my mother's side.
On your mother's side?
Yeah.
Okay.
I always like to emulate both my grandpas, because my grandpa on my dad's side was a hard-working man. He was a carpenter. My grandpa Jones built boxcars, and he was laid off. I mean, they spent half a dozen years before food stamps, before unemployment or anything like that. And he had a yard about as big as this whole area around here. And that's what they lived on for half a dozen years. My grandpa was a great gardener, and I would like to be a gardener one day. My grandpa Hugh was a great golfer.
Okay. We're going to pick up on that in just a moment. We need to
Okay.
take a break, so don't go away.
All right.
Canine Stray Rescue does just that. Rescue stray dogs for new families. But they need your help. Become a volunteer at Canine Stray Rescue League of Michigan. Take dogs for walks, help them socialize with others, and help them get adopted. Fill out an application and help a family add a new member today.
Here with Greg Jones. You were just talking, what, about your grandfather being a golfer?
Yeah, my grandpa Hugh was a golfer. Let me tell you something about Grandpa Hugh too. Grandpa Hugh was a veteran too of World War I, and he got shot in the lung on a charge he made. He was a major in the Army, in the National Guard, and they sent him over there. He was one of the doughboys, and the Germans had him surrounded, and they had to fight their way out, and he led a charge, and he got shot in the lung. He was a right-hander, and he had to switch over to left-handed. He could only knock the ball 125 yards at a drive, but he was very tough around the greens, and he was very good. I used to drive a golf cart for him and watch him golf.
Were you two very close?
Yes, I was very close with both my grandpas. My grandpa Jones would give me a spade and shovel, says, "Come on, son, dig that ground. We got to plant crops." Of course, my grandpa Hugh, he would take me golfing, and I won't say what favoritism, but I loved them both.
Yeah.
I still love them. I miss them. I miss my daddy too.
I
I
want
was close to my dad
to
too.
talk to you about what it was like to grow up around Port Huron. What did your father do for a living?
My father worked for his in-laws. My uncle Steve Webb was president of the company, and my dad could sell a cube of ice to Eskimos in the middle of winter, if you can believe that. And he would go and sell carloads of coal, and then eventually became manager of coal yards around. They made him district manager, and his brother-in-laws were managers of other yards in and around the Michigan area.
Did you have any brothers or sisters?
I do indeed. I've got 4 brothers and sisters. I was the oldest. I got an 18-month sister, Jan. She's suffering with schizophrenic. They just declared her insane. Just this last couple of years, I could tell you a whole story about that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, one of the minuses in the family. I've got another brother underneath him, 7 years younger than me. His name is Dan Jones, and he died of a brain tumor. He had it for about 8 years and finally succumbed to it back in 2004. He was only 49 years old. I got a sister that we were living on Lake Huron at the time, and if you remember, the winters were very cold. They had ice along the shores of Lake Huron, and the 22nd of December 1962, her and the neighbor boy decided to go looking for Santa Claus, and they got out of the ice, and they went through the ice, and of course it just really devastated my mom for a long time. But through this experience, we all found the Lord through this, the Lord Jesus Christ. And I call her our angel of light. We were pretty much living in darkness, and we experienced salvation through the Lord through this experience. After Linda had gone home with Jesus, suffer the little children to come unto me. By the way, they say that in the meetings we have in the 334th, our Commander Mouse quotes that verse because we helped the kids at Cedar Rapids. At any rate, I got another little brother after that came along in '64. He was the tail end of the baby boomers, and he's like 51 years old. A couple of years ago, he calls up and tells me, "Greg, I've got problems. I'm tired all the time." Is it your heart? No, I got leukemia.
Oh boy.
Yeah, but he's got the thing in check now, and so.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
You needed some good news, didn't you?
Yep. He's a Lightning fan, but I won't hold that.
Well, tell me, what did you enjoy doing most, living and growing up in Port Huron? I mean, you were close to the water and everything.
Yep. Sailed a lot. We got a shearwater catamaran. My dad was like a kid then. He was only 20 years older than me. He was in his 30s, and him and his friend would sail, and they would have me come along with them. I was like a teenager, 12, 13 years old, and I sailed there, right there on Lake Huron, and would race sailboats, and I like golfing. I golfed in the golf courses around there and played baseball. Struck out a lot of times.
Did you play sports in high school?
Yes, I did. I was playing football, and I ended up hurt my knee really bad, where I ended up in a cast, and I ended up, when I was a senior, I finally went out for long distance running, cross country, where you'd have to run 8 miles. And so I did that. But I got my picture in the senior book that Greg Jones participated in cross country, and I thought, oh, okay, that's
What high
good.
school did you go to?
Well, we started out, John, in Port Huron High School in '62. I remember going through that Cuban Missile Crisis and all that, and they built a new high school, and they got it built in '65, Port Huron Northern. So the North Enders went to Port Huron Northern from '65, and I graduated in 1966. In fact, we're going to be celebrating our 50th anniversary this year.
Obviously, Vietnam was going hot and heavy while you were in high school.
Oh, it was. We're drafted all over. Yeah.
What was going through your mind as far as your future was concerned when you were going through high school? Having a grandfather being an executive of the coal company,
Right.
I would think maybe they were trying to talk you into joining the firm.
Well, I did work one summer where I cleaned furnaces. I felt like somebody grabbed me by the ankles and went to the ducts and just used me for cleaning. I was dirt from head to toe, and I was paid minimum wage. And Grandpa Webb, being the businessman he was, didn't like to pay minimum wage, and didn't think I was worth minimum wage, so I didn't. I only worked one summer there. No, I was like going to be drafted, and I ended up going to Port Huron JC. I did not know what I wanted out of life. I was into partying and doing all kinds of shenanigan things like people used to really get in trouble for 1966. And so I went through 2 years of JC, Port Huron Junior College at the time. And I met my wife in April of 1968. And we got married in '68. I ended up working for Barney Fardy's supply, delivering supply stuff all over around. And
Well, we're going to talk about the transition from civilian to military in just a minute. We need to take a break, but we'll be right back. Don't go away.
All right.
Here with Greg Jones. Greg, I want to talk about your experience in Vietnam, and let's start with how you ended up going there. Were you drafted?
I was drafted, but I was able to get into the U.S. Air Force before I was actually drafted, because I was hearing that kids my age were getting killed left and right, and so, and of course my parents lost a child, and I said, boy, I really couldn't put them through that again, and so I got into the Air Force. And I remember going and talking to the recruiter, and I asked him, I said, do they send Air Force personnel to Vietnam? He says, oh, no, we don't send Air Force. Well, all right. But at any rate, I went in basic training in 1969, January 69, 6 weeks down Lackland Air Force Base.
Right.
In San Antonio, Texas.
Were you married at that time?
I was married.
Okay.
We got married in August. I went in the Air Force January 69. They sent me up from Lackland up to Illinois. I got my training in egress repairman. That's, if you know anything about egress means, this is what I was telling the kids. What does egress mean? Egress means exit, leave. And so I worked on the emergency systems of the fighter aircraft and on the B-52 also. That if you pull up on hand grips, what happens? You start an initiation, gas initiation through the system, and you get the canopy up into the airstream, boom, the canopy's gone. This exposes the hand grips. You pull any one or both of the hand grips, you start a gas initiation through the system, and there's a rocket catapult strapped to the pilot's back.
Where'd you go for
he's
training on that?
I went up to Illinois at Schnute Air Force Base, Rantoul, Illinois. They've closed it since then. I always remember that base because I remember walking on it. They had a big, remember the B-29s, and they had planes all over, but when you first go in, you see the big B-29, it was there.
Was it after that that they sent you to Vietnam?
Yes. Well, they sent me to Luke Air Force Base first. My wife and I never been west of the Mississippi. We had a 66 Pontiac Le Mans, and we drove pretty much I-70 all the way out to Phoenix, Arizona. It took us while we broke down in Kansas, Abilene, Kansas, in fact. It's where President Eisenhower grew up as a kid, and they had the library there.
Where were you stationed when you found out you were going to Vietnam?
I was in Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, Arizona, and I got there in June of '69. It's like 110 degrees, and here were a couple kids. Only time it got 100 maybe once when we were growing up.
How long were you there before they gave you your
I
orders?
was there about a year, John. I was there in June of '69, and 1970 was right after we invaded Cambodia, and they were going down the alphabet list, and it got to the J's, and it was me and Johnson and Jones got cut for orders in Vietnam, and I didn't want to call back to my parents. Of course, they were all worried about us kids and everything, and I said, I got orders for Vietnam. I said, Mom, it's going to be all right. It's going to be all right. I'm not.
Where did they send you in Vietnam first?
They sent me a little fishing village, John. It's called Phan Rang, Vietnam. They had a base there called, it's Phan Rang. 100s were there. It was 35th Squadron. We had about 50 birds there. There were single-seaters, most of them. There were D models. We had a couple, 3 F models. They had the Army was there. The Army protected us. They were on the perimeter, and we could see flares go up quite a bit because the Charlie, you know what Charlie is? That's the communist. Mm-hmm. The VC, we called them. They would come try to get over the fence line with satchels of explosives to get at our birds, and we had what you call revetments. They were fortified, moon-shaped hangars that could sustain a rocket attack if that happened, and we worked on the birds all night long. I did double duty. They had me driving a taxi It's called Black 3. I would take the mechanics way out, because they had to be way out where these revetments were, and I would pick up hydraulics. These birds would come back in, John. Either they would be broke or shot up or whatever, and we had to work on them from 6 o'clock at night to 6 in the morning, get them all airworthy for the next day's flight. Every day was like that. No such thing as weekends, no such thing as holidays. Christmas was just like any other day.
How long were you in Vietnam?
I was just there a year. My hat's off to the kids nowadays, because they come back from where they were stationed. Some of them get shot and heal me up. I want to go right back in.
Did you do the same thing for that whole year? Was your assignment the same?
Right. I drove a taxi truck, plus I worked on the egress system. They had me drive out the hydraulics, and they said, oh, by the way, Jones, Queen 3 has got a plane, a F-100D model that's got to have the seat out, because CODCOM would have to have room to get to their equipment.
What was your life like living in Vietnam during that time?
My life was, I was lonesome. I was only married for a little over a year then. We didn't have any kids. The babe and I didn't have, I call her the babe, didn't have any kids, but first time I was really separated from her for a long time. We met in Hawaii on R&R, and that was the fastest 5 days in my life.
I bet it was. When you were done in Vietnam, were you released from
No, I
the Air
wasn't,
Force?
John.
What was your next assignment?
Back at Luke Air Force Base, they had me training on the F-4s then. It's a Navy bird. I don't know if you interviewed Mr. Mouse.
Yes, we did.
Jim Mouse, he calls it. This is called Mouse. He worked on what I did. He worked on the egress system, but he was aboard the Kitty Hawk. I was on stable land.
So how long were you there?
I was there for 1 year. I was there from just about to the day 1970. From June 30th, 1970 to June 30th of 1971. And then...
Did you come back to Michigan right after that with your wife?
No, after I left Vietnam, they sent me back to Luke Air Force Base in Phoenix, learned about the F-4s, trained the other young airmen how to work on the egress system. I moved up in rank. I was a sergeant when I was there, 3-striper, and I got promoted to 5-striper, and I got one more level at 5. I went from 5 level to 7 level there. I had to take tests and all that. My wife got pregnant when we were there. We had trouble getting pregnant. We finally got pregnant, and I didn't have any insurance or anything, so I extended 1 year. And if you remember, 1974, the war was just about done. It was over with, no more enlistments. And I wish I would have re-enlisted the chance I had. I wish I would have stayed in for 20, but be that as it may, the dear Lord took care of us for
Well,
20.
we're very fortunate to have you in our area and to come to the school and talk to the kids. We're very grateful for that.
Mm-hmm.
We're grateful for your membership in the local VFW and for
They're a fine bunch of...
your activity with the Poppies every year,
Mm-hmm.
and of course for being a member of the Marymount Community Church and volunteering with them. And we're, above all else, I'm grateful that you showed up and interviewed with us today. Thank you very much for doing that.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Thank you for having me.
And we're glad
to
that
do
you
it.
joined us too here on My Life. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.